Hi there, I'm Mara. Have you ever trusted your family so much, only to find out they were the ones quietly tearing you down? That's exactly what happened to me. They mocked my career, stole my opportunities, and when I finally fought back, the betrayal ran even deeper than I ever imagined. How does it feel when the people you love the most become the ones you fear the most? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I really want to know. Have you ever had to stand alone against your own family? Tell me your story too. The sun blazed too brightly for October as I slid into the last empty chair at the brunch table. Austin always seemed to forget it was supposed to be fall. The cafe buzzed with the weekend crowd, silverware clinking against plates, baristas calling out names, laughter bouncing off the exposed brick walls. My family's laughter was no different, loud, overbearing, and just slightly mean. I smiled tightly as my mother pressed a mimosa into my hand. "Look who's finally graced us with her presence," she teased. Everyone chuckled politely. I sat there, folding my hands in my lap, letting their conversation wash over me. Same old stories, same old pecking order. Sierra, my sister, always front and center, the sun we were all supposed to orbit. I stirred my drink slowly, my reflection warping in the golden liquid. The quiet one, they always said about me. Invisible Mara, reliable Mara. The sister who faded into the background while Sierra's light burned blindingly bright. The server brought out our plates, and Sierra raised her glass for a toast. "To family," she beamed, hair and makeup flawless, as if she were posing for a lifestyle magazine spread. "And to Mara," she added, voice dripping with fake affection, "for whatever it is she's doing these days, keeping it low-key or invisible." The table tittered with forced laughter. My face burned, but I kept my smile frozen in place. I felt my mother pat my hand under the table, a weak apology in her touch, but she said nothing. None of them did. I pressed my nails into my palm until the sharp sting grounded me. I stayed silent, letting Sierra have her moment. But deep inside, something cracked. A hairline fracture in the foundation I'd spent years pretending was unbreakable. Days later, at Luminar Analytics, I stood by the coffee machine, the hum of the espresso maker covering my presence. Sierra's voice floated over from the break room, sharp and unguarded. "I don't know how anyone can stand this place," she said. "It's full of faceless managers who think they're gods because they control a few spreadsheets." The group with her laughed. She didn't even realize I was close enough to hear her. Or maybe she didn't care. My chest tightened, blood roaring in my ears. She hadn't just mocked me at brunch. She was doing it here too, in the place I'd fought tooth and nail to carve out a reputation. I stared at the cheap tile under my shoes, willing myself to stay calm. For years, I had believed being invisible was safer, smarter. No one could hurt you if you didn't make yourself a target. But that armor was cracking now, and anger bled through the fractures. I turned, walking briskly back to my desk, the two bright fluorescents flickering above me. The urge to confront her warred with the voice in my head that warned me, "Keep the peace. Stay small. It's easier that way." But something had shifted. I felt it in the marrow of my bones. Sitting alone at my desk later, nursing a cold coffee I no longer wanted, I watched Ethan Powell stroll by. He was new, confident, someone people listened to even if they didn't want to. He glanced at me with a half smirk. "You hear the new gossip?" he asked, almost casually, almost as if he knew. I met his gaze steadily for the first time in a long while. Maybe this time, Sierra's casual cruelty wouldn't go unnoticed. Maybe this time, the quiet one would be anything but invisible. The rain drummed a steady rhythm against the massive windows of Luminar Analytics, a dull grayness pressing in from the outside. I sat at my desk, the hum of computers and the soft murmur of conversations, doing little to drown out the echoes of Sierra's words looping endlessly in my mind. Sleep had been a stranger last night, chased away by the rising tide of humiliation and something sharper. Anger, raw and electric. I was mechanically scrolling through emails when Ethan appeared, moving with the kind of careful casualness that instantly put me on alert. Without a word, he slid a small flash drive onto my desk and leaned in, his voice low. "Might be something you want to hear," he said, giving me a look that carried weight far heavier than his tone suggested. I stared at the drive long after he walked away. In the privacy of a side conference room, I plugged it into my laptop, heart thundering. A recording crackled to life. Sierra's voice, unmistakably smug, filled the small space. "This place is a joke. A bunch of wannabes pretending they matter. You know, it's honestly pathetic how little it takes to impress these people." Her laughter was cruel, hollow. The blood drained from my face as the clip continued, Sierra weaving a tapestry of contempt, undermining the very company she expected to elevate her. Shock hit first, sharp, disorienting. Then something colder settled in, something calculating. She wasn't just careless, she was reckless, dangerous. I closed the file and sat back, the cheap plastic chair creaking beneath me. The temptation to act immediately surged hot in my chest, but I pressed it down. Number. Let her keep digging her own grave. All I had to do was wait and watch. The strategic patience felt foreign but powerful. It wasn't cowardice, it was control. That afternoon, the storm outside mirrored the one brewing inside me. I was reviewing reports when the door to my office slammed open without warning. Sierra, all designer heels and brittle confidence, stormed in, shaking off raindrops like a cat too proud to admit it was wet. "You," she began without preamble, "need to promote me." I blinked once, slowly. "Excuse me?" She plopped herself into the chair opposite me, legs crossed, smirk firmly in place. "Come on, Mara. I'm the best thing this company's got. You know it. Everyone knows it. I could turn this sinking ship around if you'd just get out of my way." My fingers tightened around the pen I hadn't realized I was holding. The audacity, the absolute gall. Betrayal curdled with disdain in my gut, but my face remained an unreadable mask. "That's quite the assumption," I said mildly. Sierra leaned forward, dropping her voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "You can either ride my coattails or get left behind, sis. Your call." I watched her for a beat too long, letting the silence stretch into something uncomfortable. She shifted just slightly, the first crack in her polished facade. "You'll have my answer soon," I said finally. She huffed, clearly expecting immediate compliance, but stood up, tossing her hair over her shoulder like a banner of victory. When the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled slowly. The room felt different now, heavier, the air charged with inevitability. She had handed me the match herself, and I was already standing in gasoline. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, painting the city in endless shades of silver and black. My apartment, usually a refuge, now felt like a cage where walls closed in tighter with each passing hour. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, reports strewn around me like debris after a storm. My laptop's glow cast ghostly shadows across the paperwork as I flipped through page after page. Something wasn't adding up. I narrowed my eyes, tracing project milestones attributed to Sierra. The numbers shimmered under scrutiny, but not with brilliance. No, with deceit. Deadlines she bragged about meeting were, upon closer inspection, quietly extended. Metrics she flaunted were built on fudged data points. A growing, gnawing suspicion whispered louder. Was this incompetence? Or was it calculated? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating only a moment before diving deep into the internal logs. I pulled audit trails, cross-checked timestamps, and there it was, cold and irrefutable. Sierra had manipulated project records to paint herself in gold while standing on foundations of sand. A hollow laugh escaped my lips, startling in the quiet room. Of course she would build her house of cards right under my nose, in the company I had helped nurture with years of blood and sacrifice. I started collecting it all. Screenshots, copies of altered documents, notes on discrepancies. I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. No, the house needed to be fully built before it collapsed spectacularly, leaving no doubt about who engineered its downfall. The week trudged forward, each day layering a new film of disillusionment over what little remained of familial loyalty. It was Thursday afternoon when an email from IT popped up in my inbox. Simple, almost innocuous. Unusual server access patterns detected. Investigating potential security breach. My gut twisted. After a quiet conversation with IT, I accessed the flagged activity. Sierra's credentials, late-night logins, attempts to open restricted directories, folders holding sensitive client information and internal strategies. I felt the world tip, cold and vicious. That night, after everyone had trickled out and the office lights had dimmed into a hushed twilight, I stayed behind. Alone, I combed through the server's security logs, each entry another nail in Sierra's coffin. She wasn't just a fraud, she was a threat. A deep, focused rage settled inside me, not explosive, not reckless, but something sharper, something that would not be denied. By day, I remained the model of professionalism. Smiles when required, meetings conducted flawlessly. Meanwhile, I watched her, Sierra, growing bolder, sloppier, utterly unaware that her every misstep was now a stitch in the noose tightening around her. Late one evening, the empty office hummed with the sound of the cleaning crew's vacuums somewhere in the distance. I sat at my desk, sipping bitter coffee, eyes glued to the security camera feed on my laptop. There she was, Sierra, slipping into the records room like a ghost who thought herself invisible. She glanced over her shoulder, pulled her hoodie tighter, and vanished into the dark corridor beyond. I leaned forward, a slow smile curling at the corner of my mouth. "One more step," I whispered, my voice barely a ripple against the heavy air, "and you'll fall right into my hands." The office buzzed faintly with the whir of air vents and the occasional creak of settling walls. I sat alone at my desk, lit only by the pale blue glow of my monitor, the server access logs sprawling like a confession across the screen. Every unauthorized click, every confidential file Sierra had touched, stared back at me in cold, damning lines of text. There was no mistaking it now. A knot twisted deep in my gut as I closed the reports, locking them away in a secure folder. The weight of my decision pressed harder with every breath. Exposing her wasn't just a professional necessity anymore. It was personal. Still, the price loomed heavy, as visible and inescapable as the storm clouds clawing at the windows outside. I met with HR early the next morning. No one else knew. Quietly, discreetly, we initiated a formal investigation. Sierra's name wasn't spoken aloud, yet, but it hung between us, thick and poisonous. I watched the HR manager's careful nods, their clipped reassurances about maintaining confidentiality, and all I could hear was the crackling echo of family dinners where lies were plated next to mashed potatoes and roast beef. 16 years ago. Sierra, 9 years old and angel-faced, had cried her way out of stealing my birthday money, while I was branded too sensitive for accusing her. I remembered Dad's hand clamping my shoulder too tightly, the low warning in his voice. Family sticks together. Always. The pit in my stomach then, the one that screamed this was wrong, felt identical to the one gnawing at me now. When Saturday came, I should have stayed home. I should have claimed a migraine or an emergency. Instead, like a fool, I showed up to the family barbecue, the smell of charred ribs and fresh grass thick in the humid air. It started casually enough. Laughs over cornhole games, kids screaming as they chased each other through sprinklers. But when the sun started dipping and beer loosened tongues, the ambush unfolded. Mom cornered me first, her voice dripping with saccharine concern. "Sweetheart, we heard there's trouble at work. Maybe you're taking things too personally?" Before I could answer, Dad swooped in. "You know how Sierra is. Big dreams, talks too loud, but she's harmless." The circle tightened. Uncles, aunts, even cousins who barely knew me. All pleading variations of the same poison script. Forgive. Forget. Don't air dirty laundry. We're family. I felt it, the old gaslight flickering to life, painting my justified anger as vindictiveness, my pain as cruelty. My fists clenched at my sides, nails biting into my palms. "She's hurting the company," I said, my voice calm, cold, final, and hurting me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Guilt, always the favored weapon. You're better than this, Mara, she whispered, and somehow, in their eyes, it became my fault, my betrayal. I left before dessert. Driving away, the suburban streets blurred past, a wash of golden streetlights and darkened driveways. I could still hear their voices, pleading, accusing, excusing. They wanted to pretend the cracks didn't exist, even as the whole damn foundation crumbled beneath us. The dashboard lit up with a buzz. New message. I grabbed the phone at a red light. Anonymous number. One line. Back off or it all comes down with you. The fluorescent lights in the conference room hummed above our heads, casting a sterile glow over the polished table. I sat at the head, my pen tapping lightly against a closed notepad. The chatter was subdued, but I could hear it, whispers coated in nervous energy, shifting glances, quick smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Sierra wasn't here, but her fingerprints were everywhere. When the meeting adjourned, I lingered, pretending to sort papers until the room emptied. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. The same slanted glances I once caught at family dinners now slithered through the halls of my professional life. Jordan found me by the coffee machine, his voice low and awkward. You didn't hear it from me, Mara, but Sierra's been running her mouth, saying you're cold, power-hungry. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. Even hinted you only got your position by stepping on people. The words didn't slice clean, they festered. Betrayal. Coming not only from Sierra, but now fed and fanned by blood. Our blood. I smiled, slow and deliberate, watching Jordan flinch under its weight. Thanks for the heads up, I said, voice lined with ice. Walking back to my office, I let the mask drop. Fury didn't burn anymore. It calcified. They wanted a villain? Fine. I would no longer waste breath defending myself against their conspiracies. 16 years ago. I remembered standing alone in a kitchen filled with smoke alarms and ruined birthday cake, taking the blame because Sierra cried first. Why do you always have to make her look bad? Dad had snapped, eyes dark with accusation. It was never about the truth. It was about appearances. Some things never changed. That evening, clouds rolled heavy across the parking lot as I stepped toward my car. The air smelled sharp, metallic, like a storm barely held at bay. Sierra leaned casually against the hood of my car, arms folded. Her smile was all venom. Nice little empire you've built, sis, she drawled. Be a shame if it crumbled. I kept walking, unfazed. She pushed off the car, stalking closer, voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Back off, Mara, or you won't just lose your job. You'll lose everything. I turned, the metal of my keys digging into my palm. Is that a threat? My voice was calm, almost bored. Her smile widened. Call it family advice. I laughed once, sharp, humorless. Here's mine. If you come at me again, make sure you're ready to lose more than you're willing to pay. The air between us crackled, thick with things unsaid. For a moment, I saw a flicker, the girl she used to be, before envy hollowed her out. Then it was gone. I got in my car, engine roaring to life beneath my steady hands. Halfway home, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I caught the screen at a red light, an HR notice blinking back at me. Formal complaint filed against you, urgent response required. My fingers curled tighter around the steering wheel, knuckles blanching. So it begins, I whispered, the road ahead blurring into a tunnel of headlights and inevitability. The HR meeting room was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken judgments and muted hostility. I sat at the table, facing a neat stack of papers pushed toward me by a tight-lipped administrator. At the top, formal complaint against Mara Jennings. The allegations sprawled like a smear across the page, accusations of creating a toxic work environment, of unprofessional conduct, all carefully constructed to look legitimate. My hands didn't tremble, my stomach didn't churn. Instead, a crystalline clarity settled over me, sharp and unyielding. They wanted a war? Fine. That evening, slumped against my couch, the city lights bleeding through rain-speckled windows, I opened an anonymous email. Attached was an audio file, tinny but clear. Sierra's voice slithered through the speakers, coaching two junior employees, feeding them phrases to regurgitate, promises stitched into every oily word. She's power tripping. You just have to say she threatened your career. They'll believe it coming from you. Every muscle in my body locked, a white-hot outrage clawing up my spine. My own sister wasn't content to destroy my career. She had recruited foot soldiers to do it. I closed my laptop with a snap. The rage in me refined to something lethal, something precise. This wasn't just Sierra anymore. It was a web, and I would burn it all down. The next morning, the city buzzed with the muted hum of commuters, but inside Luminar, my world went deadly silent. I met discreetly with Avery Grant, a former litigator turned corporate counsel, whose sharp brown eyes missed nothing. "You have enough to launch a full audit," Avery said, sliding the flash drive into a sealed evidence envelope. "But once this starts, there's no walking it back." I leaned in. "I don't intend to walk back anything." Together with the IT security team, we drafted an internal audit request citing policy violations, unethical conduct, and breach of confidentiality. Everything was documented, everything airtight, every step Sierra had taken, every careless lie, every betrayal wrapped in a counterfeit smile, all meticulously laid bare. As I moved through the office that afternoon, it felt different. Not heavier, not darker, just stripped. No illusions left, no fragile hopes that family loyalty would salvage anything. Only the hard, cold certainty of what had to be done. 16 years ago, I remembered a school field day, standing alone as the winners celebrated. Sierra had tripped me mid-race, laughing even as the teacher scolded me for clumsiness. I had swallowed the humiliation, promising myself next time I would see it coming. Now, I had. And this time, I would act. Back at my desk, I reviewed the final email one last time, my cursor hovering over the send button. One click, and the avalanche would begin. I breathed in, steady, breathed out, sharper, then pressed send. The confirmation ping sounded small, almost cheerful. A new notification flashed across my phone seconds later. No sender listed, just the message. "You'll regret this." I stared at the words, feeling nothing but an icy satisfaction settling in my bones. I locked my screen and tucked the phone away. "No," I whispered into the empty room. "You will." The storm outside mirrored the chaos swirling inside my apartment. Rain pelted the windows like fingers drumming on glass, frantic and relentless. I sifted through my inbox, dreading what I'd find, and it didn't disappoint. The headline glared back at me from an anonymous tabloid site. "Executive under federal investigation for fraud." Underneath, my personal financial records were laid bare, twisted, manipulated, grotesquely framed to paint me as corrupt. My throat tightened. The betrayal wasn't just public, it was surgical. Precision leaks meant to sever every tie I still had left. A second email arrived minutes later. My LinkedIn profile had been hacked. Fake status updates announced my extended leave pending investigation. Whispers turned to full-blown rumors. Even the admin at the front desk avoided meeting my eyes. Anonymous threats flooded my inbox. Thinly veiled warnings, smirking accusations. The world I had built so carefully now teetered on a knife's edge, and yet, in the thick of it all, something inside me solidified. No more hesitation, no more mercy. By noon the next day, I arranged a meeting. Neutral ground, a small cafe off Congress Avenue, crowded enough for witnesses, quiet enough for war. Sierra arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in a sleek black suit, sunglasses still perched on her head despite the cloudy sky. She slid into the booth across from me, oozing fake charm. "You look tired, sis," she purred, like a cat circling a wounded bird. I didn't waste time. I dropped a manila envelope onto the table between us. Inside, printouts of server access logs, transcripts of her coaching sessions, screenshots of falsified data entries. Her smile faltered, just for a second. "You're bluffing," she hissed. Am I? I leaned in, voice low, calm. HRIT legal. They're all in the loop now. Keep pushing and you'll watch your entire life catch fire. Sierra's fingers twitched, clenching around her coffee cup. A vein pulsed angrily at her temple. You'll go down with me, she spat. I tilted my head, studying her the way you might study a ticking bomb. Curious, detached. You're already drowning, I said. You just don't know it yet. For a moment, neither of us moved. The muted clatter of cups and the low hum of conversation filled the space between our glares. Then, without another word, Sierra stood, knocking her chair askew, and stormed out. I stayed seated, sipping my coffee slowly, savoring the bitter taste. 16 years ago. It was Sierra who had lied to cover her own mistake when Dad's prized watch had gone missing. I had taken the blame without a word, too afraid to speak the truth. Watching her now, panic cracking through her armor, the memory felt like a scar someone else had worn. Not anymore. Back at my apartment, I reviewed the latest message from legal. Meeting set for Monday. Full documentation requested. I tapped the screen lightly, my mind already spinning 3 moves ahead. I stood by the window, watching the rain wash the city clean, and whispered into the gathering night. Time to finish this. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Luminar's headquarters, but inside, the air was thick and heavy. I sat rigidly in my office chair, the audit file clutched tightly in my hands. Every page was a nail in Sierra's coffin. Forged invoices, manipulated reports, stolen client accounts. It wasn't hearsay anymore. It was undeniable. A curt email summoned me to the boardroom, and Sierra too. No agenda, no pleasantries, just urgency stitched into every word. The boardroom buzzed when I entered. Heavy oak table, sharp suits, stone faces. Sierra sat at the far end, a practiced smirk playing on her lips like she already knew how this would go. I didn't sit. I laid the evidence neatly in front of me and waited. The CEO cleared his throat. We have reason to believe significant breaches of conduct have occurred. Sierra launched into a symphony of lies. This is all a misunderstanding, she said, voice syrupy sweet. Professional jealousy, personal vendettas. I watched the performance unfold with a strange calmness, almost clinical. When it was my turn, I spoke without raising my voice. One document at a time. Financial ledgers showing the funneling of client bonuses. Recordings of confidential meetings where Sierra admitted to manipulating outcomes. Email chains riddled with tampering. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow. At first, a few board members shifted uncomfortably. Then the murmurs began. Accusatory glances. Whispers sharp enough to slice the tension. Sierra's composure cracked. She interrupted, voice rising. None of that can be proven. It's all circumstantial. The CFO leaned forward. We've verified it. Every detail. Silence wrapped the room. A silence that screamed louder than any accusation. The CEO's verdict was swift. Effective immediately, Sierra Reynolds is terminated. Legal actions are being pursued. Sierra shot to her feet, knocking her chair backward. You'll regret this, she shrieked, finger jabbing toward me. You think you're so righteous, Mara? You're nothing without us. No one moved. No one came to her defense. She stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots against marble floors. I stayed where I was, breathing in the sterile, heavy air. There were no cheers, no smiles, just the quiet closure of a chapter that should have ended long ago. I gathered my folder and walked out. No one tried to stop me. No one even looked me in the eye. 16 years ago. I had watched Sierra steal credit for a science fair project we both knew I had built alone. I had said nothing back then. Let it slide. This was different. This was final. By the time I reached the parking lot, the heat of the day had turned the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. I slid behind the wheel, hands steady for the first time in weeks. The phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Unknown number. Against better judgment, I answered. A voice I hadn't heard in years filled the car, low, hesitant. Mara, it's Mom. We need to talk. about everything. Rain traced lazy rivers down the window pane as I sat curled on the edge of the armchair, knees pulled tight to my chest. The house was almost too quiet, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood. I watched droplets race one another, their paths tangled and uncertain, much like the last few months of my life. The fallout had been brutal. Sierra's trial was set to begin in a few weeks. My family scattered. Some clung desperately to the fantasy that everything was a misunderstanding. Others, like my Uncle Ben, had cut ties entirely, blaming me for exposing what they had conveniently chosen to ignore for years. Freedom had a strange taste, bittersweet, metallic, and sharp at the edges. When my mother called, I almost didn't answer. A part of me, the raw, wounded part, wanted to pretend the line had gone dead long ago. But old habits, old hopes, die slowly. We met at a small cafe tucked away from the main streets, a neutral ground where ghosts couldn't follow. She looked smaller than I remembered, hunched into a faded cardigan, eyes rimmed red. "Mara," she began, voice trembling, "I should have protected you better. I should have seen—" I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth steady my hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for believing her lies over your truth." Apologies hung between us, fragile and incomplete. I nodded once, not trusting my voice. Trust wasn't a switch you could flip back on after years of darkness. It was something broken that sometimes never quite fit right again, no matter how carefully you tried to glue it back together. Still, for the first time in a long time, the ache in my chest loosened, just a little. Later that week, the offer arrived, a crisp, professional email from a tech startup in Seattle. A leadership role, a fresh beginning. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. The decision was supposed to be easy. Leave the ruins behind. Start over where my name wasn't a headline, where betrayal didn't lurk in every corner, but memories tangled around my ankles. Childhood laughter on summer porches, whispered dreams shared under blanket forts, promises that once meant something. I stood at the edge of it all, weighed down by invisible chains, yet knowing I couldn't stay. The night before my flight, I packed methodically. Files, clothes, keepsakes, and one photo, the family at a Christmas, long before everything cracked wide open. I sealed it into a box, not out of sentimentality, but respect for what it once represented. I didn't call anyone. No dramatic farewells, no attempts to stitch the jagged pieces back together. At the airport, the hum of humanity faded into a dull roar around me. Boarding pass in hand, I walked through the gates without looking back. As the plane surged upward, severing the last thin ties to the life I had known, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Heart hammering, I opened the message. "We're not finished yet." For a moment, everything inside me went still. Then slowly, I closed the message and stared out the window, the clouds swallowing us whole. Mara stared at the message, her heart pounding, realizing some battles never truly end. She clutched her phone tightly, determined that this time she would be ready for whatever came next. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones no one else sees. The battles to defend your name, your dignity, your truth. Walking away from the life I once knew wasn't easy, but I learned that protecting your peace is worth every scar left behind. Family, loyalty, love. They are precious, but not at the cost of losing yourself. In the end, standing up for your truth might mean standing alone, but it also means standing free. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to walk away from something you once thought was unbreakable? How did you find your strength? Let's share and support each other. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about standing up for yourself, drop a 1 in the comments. Or if you have another perspective, feel free to share. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Let's keep growing and healing together.